All righty, we got the green light. It looks like we are live right now. And thank you so much, Miss Johnson, for being here with me, as well as EyeCU Reading and Social Network. I'm excited for this because I announced your book for book club last month. I want to say it was December the 11th.
Oh,
And I
wow.
told them that this is the book that we were reading. And I think by the next week, someone had texted me and they had read it twice.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, so you're excited, huh?
Oh.
So we are definitely going to give everybody opportunity to come on in so that they can get in on the conversation that we're going to have on this evening. I see that Sam is here wishing me a happy birthday. Thank you, Sam.
Yes,
So
happy birthday,
much.
Tam. And thank you for doing this on your birthday. That makes it like doubly special.
It is. Thank you for this. This is a birthday gift to me. So
Yes.
I always get kind of nervous beforehand. So I'm like, I get kind of like, in I don't want to say groupie, but I just get excited because, authors be so to me.
That's
So
how I
I'm,
am too. I'm the same way.
so
Whenever
I'm
I'm
like,
in conversation with someone, like when you saw me in conversation with Victoria Christopher Murray, I was kind of like, ooh,
I
ooh.
know, right? I was like that
I
too. And because I did an interview with her last year, and I was just like, I want to call her auntie, but I don't want to offend her because she felt like an auntie to me.
Yeah, she's super
So,
sweet.
but I was like, I don't know if I should say that. I don't want to offend her or anything. But we had a good time over there. I know we're gonna have a good time tonight as
That's
well.
right.
We still
Yes.
have everybody coming on in. Hi, Stacy.
Hey, Stacy.
The EyeCU page is here, so I know that that's Ebony. Ebony is going to have questions. She for
Mm.
sure is gonna have her questions. She'd be right. I think she types them out in advance and then she copies and pastes. I think so because they be long. They be
Oh,
long. So
wow. Wow. Wow.
and the Kenya, hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. Everyone, please make sure that you are sharing this live stream right now for anybody who has read the book, for anyone who is looking to read the book. I will make sure that I mention that we will have spoilers. So, for
Oh,
those of you who are going to be tapping in, we cause y'all know I need to delve into details and ask questions and give my feelings. So there will be spoilers, people. So you may have to cover your ears at some point in time, but I'll make sure to warn you all because I want everyone to read this book because it's so very good. It's so very good. I've been getting tagged on my page because people are looking for book suggestions. I'm like, hey, you need to read Yellow Wife. Then they on my page and
mm.
they're like, um, okay, I can't deal and I can't read this book at work. It's just too much. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a couple days off, so I was able to indulge in the book without being at work and ready to fight somebody. So
Yeah, it's a tough read. It
it
is, but I mean, I know I wrote it, but it's a read that we all need, you know? It's
mhm.
it's it's the history that we all need to know.
It is. And so we do have quite a few people that are in here now. So I want to go ahead and formally just thank everyone for being here on this evening. We are going to delve into some conversation for our author. And you guys feel free to put your questions in once we get to that area. And like I said, share this on the EyeCU page and any of the other reading groups because I know that there are tons of people who've already read the book. There are folks talking about it last year when it first came out. So any of those individuals who want to have opportunity to come on in and ask some questions, then they can. So first, I wanted to start off with just asking you to, and I know you probably said this a zillion times in interviews, but if you can just give us a little background on how the Yellow Wife book came to be.
Okay, well, first I didn't thank you. Did I thank you? Did I thank you for having me on your birthday? My
You
goodness, thank
did.
you.
You know how it is when
Okay.
we start talking before we go live. You
Yes.
did.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody who's out there watching on Facebook and sharing and talking about Yellow Wife. I mean, it means an awful lot to me. It's my fourth novel, but it's the novel that now I'm becoming known for. A lot of people think it's my first book because they hadn't heard of me prior to Yellow Wife. So I appreciate all of the love and sharing and caring that's going on with this book. I moved to Richmond in 2016. I was living in New Jersey, and I got this voice in my head that said you should move. And we were already looking for a house, so when I heard move, it felt like move out of the state of New Jersey. This was February of 2015. By June of 2015, we were all moved in to our Virginia home. Everything kind of flowed, and I couldn't figure out why was I like leaving my friends and uprooting my kids, and like my family lives in Philadelphia, so why was I leaving? Well, 9 months later, after we moved into our house, we had some Jersey friends come down for spring break, and we were looking for an activity that we could do with their kids and our kids. And someone suggested that we take a walk along the Richmond Slave Trail. And the Richmond Slave Trail has been in existence since 2011. If you have not been to Richmond, it snakes along the James River. There's 17 markers on the trail, and it talks about what it was like for the enslaved people as they came into Richmond. And we're taking our time, we're reading the markers, and we get to the marker that talks about the Lumpkins jail. And it was described as a punishing center and holding site for enslaved people. It said that the smells were horrific, and the
Yeah.
owner was referred to as the devil. And this was the devil's half acre. And, when I was reading the marker, what really caught my attention was that it said that he was married to a Black woman, and her name was Mary Lumpkin. And together they had 5 children. And while he was one way in business, which was mean and evil and conniving, and, he had the nickname the bully trader, in their life, he was kind and considerate. And I kept trying to figure out, what does that mean?
Mhm.
As a Black enslaved woman, I knew that Mary Lumpkin did not have any agency over her life. So what was this marriage like for her? Was it a marriage of survival? Did she love him? Was there some conveniences? And what was life like for those 5 children? And that was kind of that first little bug of the story that I felt kind of got underneath my skin and said, Sadeqa, pay attention right now. Pay attention.
Mhm. Yeah, I have the hardcover of the book, and when you open it up, actually on the cover, down at the bottom, there is like these buildings, and then when you open it up, there's this photo. You see it, and in my
Mhm.
head, I said, "Oh, there go the Devil's Half Acre." Is my assumption correct? Is that the
That
Devil's
is
Half Acre?
correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So that is the original picture of what the Lumpkins jail looked like. And so
Wow.
I used that picture and tried to recreate it in the story.
Wow. And you did it very, very well. Very well. And of course, I want to say that I told you recently that I just finished the book. And some of the things that just brung out to me was this selflessness of our main character. It was always what she had to do for the sake of other people. And I just think that that still is embedded in women, Black women, to this very day, is that we're always kind of making sure everybody else is okay.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it's wrong for us to make ourselves a priority. And that was like what just kept ringing out in my head while I was reading it. It's like all these opportunities that she was getting to not trust somebody who she shouldn't have trusted, and to actually have her freedom, and she still had to be concerned with how to make sure everybody else was okay. So
Mhm.
that's one of those things for me. And I also wanted to mention how stories like this is really important to me. My book club knows that if I'm picking a book for the month, it's probably gonna have a slave in it. I am a historic fiction buff, and while I recognize that every piece of historic fiction does not have to involve slaves, it's important for me to always keep myself reminded of the sacrifices that Black Americans made for us. We're in a day
Mhm.
and age where they are constantly finding ways to remove our true history from us. And sometimes
Mhm.
the only thing we're going to have left is these stories, these
Yeah.
novels that are being written for us. And so that's why I will always, always, always read my historic fictions. And they going to have me some Black people in them. And they'll probably have some slaves.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I would say that prior to writing Yellow Wife, I was also really attracted to historical fiction, but specifically along the lines of slavery. And so I remember when I was younger, I think my first introduction to this period of history was Jubilee by Margaret Walker. I read that when I was a teenager. And then later on, I discovered Wench by Dolan Perkins Valdez.
yep, we've read
And
that one.
yes, love
For book,
that
we read
one.
that one before, and it was my selection.
Yeah, I love that one. I also loved Lazaretto by Diane McKinney Whetstone. And I had read that book like just a couple of weeks before I was walking on the slave trail. And it was funny because as I was reading it, I found myself kind of studying the way she was writing the historical fiction of it, not knowing that I was kind of preparing myself to transition into writing historical fiction because my first three novels were contemporary fiction. This was a
Mhm.
leap for me. So it was very, very different.
And you've done it so well, like so well. Just
Thank you.
I absolutely adored this book. I love that it did not have like this happily ever after type of ending. It was a very realistic ending. Um, she didn't go away, and she just life ended up just happening. And the epilogue, and where she talks about what she's writing to her daughters, and we're realizing what their lives ended up being like, it's just so real. And I think that sometimes for me, when I listen or read these stories, it's reminiscent of the stories that I've heard from my family,
Mm,
because my family is from Alabama, and I've had aunts who, was the daughter of the master, and
mhm,
he had a baby with, this Black woman. Later on, she early on she was passing as a white woman. I see pictures of her early on, and I'm like, oh yeah, she definitely looked white. Now when she got
mm,
older, she wasn't passing for nobody's white. No, there was, child, you is Negra, okay? But early on, she passed, and
mm,
there was this disconnect that she would have with her younger brothers, because when they came along, my great grandmother had her children with another Black man. So you have this mulatto child, and then you have these darker children. And so there's this division. And so when I read books like this is not, just completely and totally removed from me, because I
mhm.
came up hearing these
These
stories. It's
stories. And
so
I
it's
think that's true of all of us. We've all
mhm,
come up hearing the stories of our ancestors being passed through the generations, and I think that that's what I wanted with the story is that I wanted it to be accessible to everybody because I look at the story of Yellow Wife as this is our American history. This is
mhm,
not just Black history. This story is our American history. Our country has been built on the backs of enslaved people in every single facet of it.
yep,
And so this is the way we began. And I always tell my kids, for us to know where we're going, we need to know where we came from. And so I applaud
absolutely.
you for continuously picking books that highlight the sacrifices that our ancestors have made for us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I'm going to go ahead and open things up for questions. Let's see, we're at 7:15. We usually try to make sure we stay in our 1 hour realm because I know
Mhm.
that you are a very, very busy woman. So if we have anyone that has any questions for Miss Johnson on this evening, then make sure you go ahead and get those down into the comment section. But while we're waiting on any of those, question for you. Can you tell me what was the hardest scene to write in this book? Oh,
Mhm.
P.S. There will be spoilers, like right now. Okay. All right.
There were a lot of difficult scenes, to be honest. I would say for me, the ones that really got me down in my soul was the scenes where Phoebe was separated from her children. So when she wakes up and she runs out, and her children are being carted away, and she doesn't even realize she's barefoot, and she has on her nightgown like that. I have 3 children, and so just the feeling of someone taking your children away from you, that really was gut wrenching for me. And all of the flogging scenes were difficult to write, but I will say that all of the flogging scenes were all true. I did not make any of them up. I came across them in my research. So if it wasn't true to the Lumpkins jail, it was true to someone. And so I lifted those scenes from real slave narratives. I read a book called 50 Years a Slave by Charles Ball, where he describes some really horrific things that he witnessed with his own eyes. And I felt like it was my job to give these people a voice who didn't have a voice. And so I tried to get their story down as truthfully as I could throughout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so one of the hardest scenes for me was when Miss Delphina drowned the baby
Mm.
in the river. I
Mm.
that took me. Like that
Mm.
really took me. It's just how frivolous she was with this little black life. It hurt me to my heart because, regardless of how the baby came to be, it was your child.
Mm.
It was a part of you, and just how easily and quickly you were able to rid yourself of it. That hurt
Mhm.
me. It did.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the scenes where I had to close the book up and give myself a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had
I
I,
could
I
see
did.
that.
I did.
Mm.
All right, we got some questions that's coming on in here. And oh, I think I took someone's question.
Yeah.
Ebony says, I was in absolute awe of how I felt transported into the story. The detail and descriptions were impeccable. And how did you learn to transcribe dialect of that time?
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you, Ebony. So, what I did, the first thing I did when I was thinking about the dialects for the story is I went back and I grabbed a copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston,
Okay.
because she uses dialect throughout the story. And so I
Mm-hmm.
thought, let me read the first chapter and write down kind of every time she slips into dialect so that I could see what the pattern was. And so that was kind of where I started. I looked at the pattern in the way she used dialect in her story, and then I added it to Yellow Wife, but then I would brush it away with each draft so that it was enough there for you to understand where you were, but it wasn't too much where it distracted you and took you out of the story, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. So,
Yep.
and then after a while, I could just kind of start to hear the way each character spoke and the difference between when she was on the plantation, which was, in Charles City, Virginia, which was more country and rural, to when she got up to Richmond, which was more city like. And so I thought
Mm-hmm.
that, the dialect, the way they spoke, the difference between Massa and Mars, I looked up all the different ways that these planters were referred to by their enslaved people. And so I figured it would change even though it was still Virginia, it would change.
Yeah. Well, thank you for getting to Ebony's question. I know we got some more. They started coming in on me pretty quick. Let's see. um, we've got some comments. So Elise, she mentioned how she hated how trusting Phoebe became at certain points. And she tagged me, made a video and everything, because she was just mad that, Phoebe, I'm sure this is what she was talking about. She was mad that Phoebe, you know, trusted so many people who she just really shouldn't have trusted. And it made me feel a way too. Like, girl, you really think that you're gonna be free? That in this moment where you can get away from here, you just gonna sit back? Oh, I'm gonna get my papers when I turn 18. And I had to remind myself that she was 17. She was a teenager. She was young, and everything about her life at that point made her believe that it was okay to believe this. That's what her mama was telling her. She loved and trusted her
Mhm.
mama.
Of course.
And overall, she hadn't had a quote unquote bad life as a
Right.
slave. So she had every reason in her very young, naive mind to believe that this was something that she was going to have.
Hmm.
And I guess I can think right now in my adult fast forward, more than 100 years later, to know that, baby,
Yeah.
no, baby, this is what you can't do. You kind of saw the writing on the wall as you're reading, and you just like, no, Phoebe, baby, you got to go, and you got to go now. Go on with your man, honey.
Hmm.
But she didn't.
I
She
think it's
didn't.
important too, just to say that, we are looking at this story through 2021 eyes.
Yep.
And, it's really hard for us to fully imagine being in such a world where you had no choices. You didn't know who you could trust. Your back was
Mhm.
always up against the wall. And you really are just trying to rub two sticks together and make something happen for yourself. And, that's what I was trying to show with Phoebe. And so, like, yeah, some of those decisions I wouldn't have made,
Right.
because 100 or so years later, I know that that's not going to work for you. But in that moment in 1850 at 17, or in that moment when she
Yeah.
was with the dressmaker, she really didn't have any other options.
Yep.
And so if she was going to try and make a run for whatever, she had to pick and choose who she thought might be the lesser of the two or three evils. And I think
Yeah.
that's what she did in all those situations.
Yep. I totally agree. I have when I've spoken with other historic fiction writers, that was something that they had to kind of school me on. And they said the exact same thing that you're saying, that hey, you are thinking about this from a 2020 mindset, and the options that were available to them, just it's totally different. So
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
To
because
not
we have a
have any
washing
agency.
machine. Yeah, and
Hmm.
we have a washing machine. We just go downstairs and throw our clothes in the washer. We keep it moving. Phoebe had to get the dolly stick and find, ash
Hmm.
and water and lye and all of that. And so if you see, just that different way of living, it led to everything. Mindset, what was
Yep.
available, what she could do.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always remind myself of that. And I find that these stories give me a lot more empathy for
Mhm.
women in general, because I believe that a lot of the slave mentality, is still embedded in us to this day. But I work in a field where I interact with women of an older age at times, and the level of patience that I have um, been able to grow, because I start to think like, I don't know what this woman's story is, because I see these women who don't smile that much, and they
Mhm.
always seem angry and bitter, and things like that. And beforehand, I can remember thinking, oh, she is just so nasty, she's so mean, and da, da, da. And now the more that I read and the more that I take in these conversations that I have with authors, I see myself saying, "Wow, I wonder what her story is. Wow, I wonder how she got to be this way." Because what I can't imagine is that you endure all of this, and these are, granted, we're talking about historic fiction and slaves, but they have children who then have children, and there's a mentality that continues to get embedded into us, and again, it's still existing to this day. And we just recently got to the place where we are thinking differently as Black women. So some of the older generation, they move differently, and I recognize, at least I feel like, it's because there are stories that we just have no clue about that is shaping them. Just like the stories that we read in these books, all of our women have these stories. And again, I love reading books like this because oftentimes we don't talk about them out loud. We don't say it out loud. I think the storytelling from generation to generation is, dwindling away. And so I'm just glad that I had family who was willing to do it with me. But I know that that's not for everybody. Everyone's situation is not that. But just yes, I could go on and on and on, and I won't. I promise I won't. But yeah, I feel like these stories have definitely helped me empathize with women better. I say all that to say that. Okay. I'm gonna go to our stream. Let's see. Yeah, heartbreaking with the baby drowning. I agree. I definitely agree. We had some that enjoyed the Audible. I did have a chance to tap in on the Audible too, so it was great. I love the Audible. So as a matter of fact, someone else, Rena, when she texted me, she had read the book and she had listened to it.
Oh, wow.
So, the Audible is getting rave reviews as well.
Awesome. And the narrator for the Audible, her name is Robin Miles, and she is amazing. She's narrated my other two novels, Second House from the Corner and Then There Was Me. So all three of my books were narrated by the same person. And she also, if you have not read The Personal Librarian by Victoria Christopher Murray, she's also the narrator for The Personal Librarian, which I listened to and I absolutely loved it.
That is good to know. I have that. So that is on my to be read list. So I'll definitely be reading The Personal Librarian. As a matter of fact, I think the author of said book is in the chat. Yeah, she is.
Hey, Victoria. My fave.
I don't think she was on when I talked about how I'll be wanting to call her auntie, because in my head she my auntie. But I don't be wanting to say. I think that might have been part of our conversation before.
That was our pre-conversation. Yes.
I was like, she's my auntie in my head, but I can't call her auntie because she might be like, no, I'm not. So, but we're glad to have you here on the live. Glad to see you. And she has always, raved about this book. So she is clearly a huge, huge supporter of yours.
Yeah, she really is a sweetie.
And let's see. It's, yes, definitely an emotional read. And what was Phoebe? Oh, okay. So the question we have is, how old was Phoebe when she had children? And I'm thinking, and you can correct me because you're the author, she had Monroe at 18.
Yeah. So Phoebe is based on Mary Lumpkin. So she's inspired by the story of Mary Lumpkin. And so the true story is that Mary Lumpkin actually came to the jail as a child. And she had her first child, as a product of rape by the jailer at age 13. So in order to write the story in a way that would be received by adults so that it wouldn't be classified as a YA book, which I probably wouldn't have got away with the story as a YA book anyway, I decided to start her at 17 I didn't know where Mary Lumpkin came from. I just know that she arrived at the jail as a child. So my idea was that I would put her on a plantation so that I could build a full life for her prior to getting to the jail, so that you would see the difference of where she came from to where she got to. But yeah, she had her first child around 18 in the story.
Whew. Mm. And she had a total of, was it a total of five?
Yes,
It
she
was a
had,
total of
but Mary
five.
Lumpkins had 5 kids, and so I wanted Phoebe's life to follow what I knew about her, to the best of my ability. But of course, I've had to pepper in a lot of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it was a combination of her story and other people's stories that I found along the way.
Oh, speaking of stories along the way, Ebony is asking, can you share some stories about people that you met while researching?
Hmm. Well, the first place I went was to a plantation here in Charles City. Well, I'm not in Charles City, but about 45 minutes from me, in Charles City, Virginia, and it's called the Shirley Plantation. And my daughters, it was summer break, so I packed them up and I took them with me as my research assistants. And we went on the tour, and I have to say that I was quite disappointed by the tour guide, because he spent all of his time talking about the artifacts in the house, the pictures on the wall, the people who lived there, but neglected to tell anything about the enslaved people. It was like they were completely and utterly blotted from the history of the plantation.
Mm,
So that was kind of disheartening for me. So I had to go home and write a letter to several people to complain, and I did receive a response back from the plantation regarding that. I talked to a professor at Virginia Union University who knew a lot about the history of the Lumpkins jail. And I asked him to read a draft of the story to let me know what was missing. And so he was very good about giving me little details about what downtown Richmond was like during that time, and, how muddy it was because they didn't have, the streets that we have today. And how one of the things he told me was that when you got into the carriage, they had kind of like this scalpel that you use to kind of scrape the bottom of your shoes, because it would get caked with like mud, and you had to be careful of manure because
yeah.
because everything was on horse. The carriages were being pulled by horses. So he was pretty interesting as well.
Awesome. I'm sure you have a lot of people that you had to speak with in doing your research, because doing historic fiction, that's also something I admire about authors that do it, is that you have to do a lot of research to get it right.
Yeah.
You can't just look to social media for a lot of things like you would if you were doing a contemporary book. You have
Yeah.
to delve
You
into
got to dig
the
a little
history.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got
Got to
to
work
dig a little
harder.
bit. And the way I did it for Yellow Wife was that I discovered the story in April, and I spent between April and September just working on the research. I was just researching it. I was world building. I was thinking about where she would live, what the plantation felt like. I was researching the jail. I built out a collage on my wall of different pictures to help me to kind of, so when I sat down to write, I could look up at this wall and I saw what that picture you saw of the jail that was hanging
Mm-hmm.
on my wall, and what I thought Phoebe looked like, and Ruth. And I separated the plantation between Hightown and Lowtown, and what did that look like. So there was a lot of that kind of bigger research that I did prior to starting the book. But then as I started writing, just right up front in the beginning of the book, when she has to dress Mrs. Delphina for the first time, well, that wasn't part of my heavy lifting of the research because I hadn't thought of it. So I had to stop writing, and then I had to figure out like exactly what did a woman in the 1850s wear, and how do you tie a corset. So
Yeah.
I had to stop what I was doing, do that research, and then fold it into the story. And also in that beginning, those beginning chapters, the other thing that I had to stop and research was, how do you clean? Right. So like we see Phoebe
Yeah.
up at the house right away. What do you polish with? And,
Mm-hmm.
how often did they change the linen? And, when she had to polish Master Jacob's shoes, what did they use for shoe polish? You couldn't just go to the store and grab some off the shelf. And so those were the smaller details that I had to figure out, as I was writing the story.
you know what has always been one of the questions that I have about those times, and you did tap into it a bit in the story, is as women, of course, we know that we have a visitor every month,
Mm.
and I know what it looks like as a modern woman to handle that type of personal business. But back in 1850, I'm just always kind of like, well, what did they do? You
Yeah,
know,
they had rags. They used
and
rags.
hmm and as you were writing, and she's like, oh, they would prop the rags and everything. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But
Hmm.
oftentimes in other books, they never really go into that level of detail or talk about
Yeah.
it. And I always think to myself, you know we talk about them knowing that they're with child because clearly something stopped, but
Hmm.
during the times when they do have it, what are they doing? And so you
Hmm.
did actually address that, and so I was like, okay, oh wow, okay, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense, but you just never see it in the book sometimes.
I
So
do like to get into the nitty-gritty. I do.
yeah,
I do like to get into the nitty-gritty
you
of things.
you got into some nitty gritty, because one of the other scenes that just kind of like tugged at my heartstrings was when she was being taken to the jail, and they came and had gotten her, and the other ladies were on that wagon,
Mhm.
and the woman had delivered a baby, and
Mm.
I'm just like, what we
Yeah.
just throwing I just and then she gets to the jail, she see her man, and she got blood dripping from her because she didn't just I
Yeah.
just could not
Yeah.
imagine. I could not imagine. Let me find somebody else's comment, because I get in my feelings. I get in my
Oh.
feelings. Okay.
I'm gonna take all those feelings as compliments, Tam.
They are. They are. I'm telling you, I'm super animated about talking about my books. If you've ever watched any of my videos, you'll probably be able to tell. But I felt I felt the way
Mhm.
consistently in this book. And although they weren't great feelings, they were painful feelings, they were necessary, because
Yeah.
we need these reminders. We do. We need these reminders. I really hope that in what I do, that I can inspire other people and even other generations to be mindful of these types of reads, because we need these stories. If
Mhm.
we don't remind ourselves of our past, we are doomed to repeat ourselves. And that's ultimately what is happening.
Yeah.
Critical race theory, where you literally have people who take pride in saying that I don't want you to know the truth, because the
Mm.
truth makes me look bad. It makes my great grandmama and them look bad. So let's not talk about that. I'm not strong enough to handle you telling me the truth.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that. And yeah, these books definitely makes me more aware of us, and it makes me more willing to share that information with anybody who is willing to listen.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's see. Because I don't want to neglect our watchers. Let's see. Okay, we got that one. Yeah, T King said, I wish I would have taken the time to ask my great grandmother about her experiences. We need to know these things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in those moments where we haven't necessarily done that or remembered, we have authors like you who are putting it in print, so that if we didn't have a conversation directly with somebody, we still have somebody who is telling the story. So we thank you for that.
Oh, yes.
Let's see, the storytelling is, yeah, the storytelling is dwindling away because people just don't seem to have time for real conversations and history lessons. And yeah, for whatever reason, we feel like history is boring. I don't know why, because I think it's the most intriguing thing, to actually, you know take in classes
Mm.
and things of that nature, documentaries and stuff. They're always interesting to me. But yeah, it's we're getting away from it where nobody wants to read anything that's past 160 characters. And so this
Mm.
becoming more and more difficult, and hopefully we are going to figure a way to bridge the gap with younger generations and how we get our history to them.
Mhm.
So let's see here. Why did you decide? This is from the Kenya. Why did you decide to have Phoebe record the names of the fancy girls that came through the Devil's Half Acre? I like that Phoebe made these women and girls' experience important by writing about them in her journal.
Oh, good question, Nikenya. Thank you. So it wasn't part of my original plan. So before I start a book, I start with kind of a synopsis. So I have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's sort of my roadmap so that I could figure out. So if I get stuck, I can look down and say, this is where I'm supposed to be. So when I wrote my early synopsis, the diary was not in it. It wasn't until I started writing that it was used as a way for me to show that Phoebe could read and write, and that she had been taught by her aunt Sally, before she had passed away, and just to kind of give that background information to the reader. But then the diary started to become a character of its own, and so she had it in her pocket, as she was moving around the plantation. And so when she left, she had it on her. And when she got to the jail, I kept thinking, well, it's here now, it needs to do something. And when she got the job of working with the fancy girls, because she had to make herself useful, it was kind of a way to pay them back, to honor the fact that they had been there, because they were going to be sold and no one would ever know that they had passed through this jail. So it was kind of a redeeming act for Phoebe, because it was like she knew that she had a hand in what was going to happen in their lives. She didn't really have a choice over it, but what she could do was preserve their memory by putting it in the diary. And it's
Yep.
almost kind of like what I've done with Yellow Wife. It was like it's me trying to preserve history so that we won't forget that women like Mary Lumpkin and Karina Hinton, those were real people, so that
I
they
agree.
that they lived. And so I felt like the diary was very similar to what I was doing with the book. And so when it started to happen, I thought, oh, this is great.
I thought the exact same thing as she was, listening to their story, asking them about themselves and taking that record down. I was like, oh, this is exactly what she's doing herself. The author is
Yeah.
doing it. She's telling the next person's story.
Yeah.
So, yep, I definitely recognize that. Let's see. Sam wants us to know that the scene that took her out was when the baby was being beat out of the woman and seeing it
Oh,
slither out
yes,
of her
yes,
onto the
yes,
floor.
yes, yes. And I have to tell you that
How
my
did you
my
get to that place for that scene?
yeah, that was true. I did not make that scene up. That truly happened, not at the Lumpkins jail, but it was either in one of the textbooks that I read, or it was in one of the slave narratives that I read, that
Mm,
that scene had happened. And so I fictionalized it by making it about her having been teaching the other enslaved people how to read. But I just saw that particular scene and I thought, oh my gosh, like this is the most horrific thing. Um, I mean, it just was a horrific time period. And
mhm.
things, these horrible things happen to our people, and I had to show it. But that particular scene, I feel like either my editor or my agent thought, oh my gosh, like that's a lot. And I was like, yeah, but I can't take it out because it
Oh,
happened. Yeah,
I was
because it
curious if
happened.
that conversation occurred. Like, were there
Yeah.
certain things that they came back and said we're gonna need you to take that out? And I'm
One
curious
of
if there were any scenes that you took out because they were like, nah.
Yeah, so that scene came up for discussion, and I was like, no, I have to leave it in because it happened. Another scene that I amended was another flogging scene. And so when Abby up at the house, is flogged because Basil disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And the jailer thought she might have had some information that she was holding back on. I actually wrote out her flogging scene, and my editor was like, okay, Sadeqa, we just had a flogging scene. Like you may want to consider alluding to it, but not physically showing it. Like you don't want to overwhelm your reader. And so I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And so instead of you seeing her physically being beaten, I just alluded to it as she came back. Another thing that I had to change was after Ben was born, when Phoebe had Ben, and yeah, that scene, it was kind of long. So my editor said, it's 7 pages. Can we get it down to 2 or 3? But I was able to get it down to about 4. But I had it was just a lot of stuff going on in that moment. I really love that scene too, like her trying to cure him and help him. And I don't know, that scene touched me. And so I was just going on for pages and pages and pages. And she said, can we condense it a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is, yeah, that's interesting. I can see how that would have came up as one of the scenes that they would have to question. But I'm glad that we were able to keep it because it's
Mhm.
necessary. Yes. So Tanya is saying, I had never heard of using hot water with peppers on a slave
Mhm.
during a slashing. I had not either. It's a wonder that Essex was able to survive such torture. Were many
Mhm.
slave masters practicing that as well? And is that something that you discovered in your research?
Yes. Again, that was true. Not for so Essex's character is based on a man named Anthony Burns. But when I
Mm-hmm.
was reading 50 Years a Slave by Charles Ball, I mean, his book was just so informative. And that was a scene that he witnessed, that there was an enslaved person who was whipped. And after every 10 or 15 lashes, they had a girl bring the hot pepper water and bathe his lashes and then keep going. A book that I'm reading right now, I'm reading How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. And he talks about how some of the enslaved masters would have their slaves beat and then wipe them down with brine so that it would sting and hurt. And so this was definitely a common practice to just turn the torture up a couple more notches. It's bad. Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad. And the gall of people today who want to just keep this a secret. How dare
Yeah.
you? How dare you call slaves immigrants or tell me that they had great lives and they were fed and had houses and so they should be thankful? How freaking dare you?
Yeah.
How dare
The
you?
houses were always inadequate. They were
Always.
basically just things that they could put together. They were not insulated. They had dirt floors. They were barely a protection against the rain. They
Mhm.
leaked. So they were inhuman conditions.
They were. And we were forced to just adapt and to be a person in this day and age who can look back on that and find a way to justify it again just says that the evilness is embedded in people to this day. So we can think that, oh, that's our history and we need to move on from that. We can't move on from it because they have moved on from it. Like
Mhm.
it's still embedded in our minds, in the way that we move, in the way that we think about each other. And child, I won't say nothing that's gonna get me flagged on YouTube or something. So, like I said, we usually have book club before we have the author interview. So we in person or we in our own Zoom, and I can say what I want to say, how I want
Yeah.
to say it,
Yeah.
But I'm gonna be tactful. I'm a I'm gonna be tactful, but it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard. Okay. We've got about 10 more minutes, so I'm gonna breeze through some more of the questions. And let's see. Watching the yellow wife take flight has me so excited for you. My coworker is so excited that there's a display in a predominantly white bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And
Mm-hmm.
what's next for Yellow Wife? This is a question from Ebony.
So, Ebony, I like to say that there are conversations happening behind the scenes about Yellow Wife the movie, Yellow Wife the series, but the energy has not reached me yet, but I'm just trying to get myself into vibration for that to happen. So I'll keep you posted.
Awesome. And let's see. We also have we want to know if there wants to see a sequel, or are there plans to bring it to screen? So I know you just mentioned, there's some discussion about that, but a sequel perhaps?
Right now, I'm not planning on writing a sequel.
Okay.
Yellow Wife took everything out of me. I'm not quite sure. I always have ideas for sequels for all of my books, but I have not written any thus far. I'm already knee deep in my fifth novel, which is also a historical. It takes place between 1947 and 1951. It's
Okay.
called Where the Bad Girls Go.
Oh,
And it
okay.
takes place in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. So I should have more information on a pub date shortly. Hopefully, we'll see.
Awesome. That's the next one. Okay. I like it because even though it's fiction and historic fiction, but it's still not that long ago. My
Yeah.
mama was born in the 50s, so
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, that
Exactly.
works. Um, yeah, Elise is like, this is a work of fiction, but not. And
Hmm.
yeah, ultimately that's what always seems to happen with, our Black historic fictional novels. Like, yeah, this might be fiction, but it's really not. As we see right
Hmm.
now with all the research and things that you've included, that these are circumstances that has happened, and
Hmm.
it's heartbreaking. It is
Yeah.
heartbreaking. Um, let's Elise, what was chapter 9? Tell me what that was. Because I don't know which I don't know what was happening in chapter 9. So tell me
Let
what
me
that
see.
was. But I
Let
know,
me see. I have my
right.
book
She
right
said she
here.
barely made it through chapter 9. I'm like, what?
Chapter
So many
9. Let's see.
books. And let's see.
Oh, yes, yes. Chapter 9. I know. That was a hard one.
Which one was
Um
that? What happened
chapter 9 was the funeral. And it's ultimately when Phoebe has to leave the plantation.
in? Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that was a
did suck.
hard one. Yeah.
Oh, and I could just see Delphina's like her little lip lines, how they just kind of go down and like I know that
Yeah.
she was, considered younger, like 24 or something like that, but I bet she still looked about 42. I bet she did. Oh, raggedy
Mhm.
child. Okay, okay. Let me use my 7 minutes wisely. Elise wants to know: did you have a favorite scene or a favorite chapter that you wrote?
Yeah, my favorite scene is actually, I mean, I love all the scenes between Phoebe and Essex. I just think that they are so endearing. I love writing about love. I love that I was able to thread some love, some light through such a dark period of history. So all
Mhm.
of the scenes with Phoebe and Essex, I loved. But one scene in particular that I liked that really showed Phoebe's strength was in part 2 when she has to go up to the auction block and she refuses to take her clothes off. And she didn't
Mhm.
care in that moment what would happen to her, but she knew she wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
And I just felt I was in awe of her as I was writing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was too. I was in awe and I was scared. I was
Hmm.
like, oh, she about to be in trouble. And I was just like on edge because I'm like, what are they about to do to her? Because she just told them no. You just
Hmm.
told this white man no. Oh, girl, you
Yeah.
you about to die. And of course we know that that didn't happen in that moment, so that's great. But definitely there were moments when she would do stuff and I was like, oh, and I like literally would stop breathing because I'm like, oh shoot, I don't know what's
Mm.
going to happen now. So
Yeah.
that was definitely one of those moments. So we are getting down to the last few minutes of our interview, and I so appreciative that you have been here with us on this evening. I also want to thank everyone who came in to the chat too with your questions. We've got another one here. Didn't I tell you Ebony was gonna have all the questions? And I think she write them out and then she copy and paste them. I was thinking she doing it. Oh, let me see. Let's see. Yellow Wife was ICU Readings intro to the Sadeqa Johnson experience. And as you can
Oh,
see, you've gained a group of fans.
thank
Aside
you.
from this one, which of your other books would you suggest we start with?
Wow. Well, I love all my babies, but I have a special place in my heart for Second House from the Corner. And Tam, I know you said that that was the other book of mine that you had on your bookshelf. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love that book. I mean, I love in a carry-on bag. That was my very first book, and that's a long distance love story. And your first book is where you learn to write. So you put your heart, sweat, tears, everything into it. So I mean, I love them all, but I would start probably with one of those.
Okay. Well, you know that I am because it's literally it's at work now because that's my lunchtime. It'll be my lunchtime read. So once I
Mm,
find out we were doing this now, it's like, oh wait, let me switch some things up. So it's sitting at the office waiting for me.
oh,
So
good.
that's what I'll be reading on next week. Let's see, couple more questions in the epilogue. Had he almost be Oh, okay. So Sam wants to know, had he almost beat her to death for them escaping? So I guess in that epilogue
Mm,
segment, I guess maybe finding out how did
yeah,
things look
I
because she clearly left.
know. Yeah, people ask that question all the time, and I'm really sorry to say that I really don't know what happened to
Mm,
Phoebe, because when I got when I knew that I needed to get those people to freedom. I knew that she needed to get them to freedom. But once she walked back up the hill and she said those few last lines, that was really it. I didn't go any further. So I don't know what happened when she got back to the plantation. But as I was writing those epilogue letters, really her daughter said, and I just wrote it down, I remember when you fell ill.
mm,
And so I thought, oh, well, something happened, but specifically what it is, I think we could
wow.
just kind of use our imagination, but it wasn't, I don't know specifically what that meant when she said something felt. I remember you felt ill. But I knew I needed to include that for the readers.
Like there was something
There
that
was
happened.
something.
And
Yeah.
I love it. Use your imagination. You
Yeah.
can decide what you want it to be. And it wasn't good, but she survived it, and
Hmm.
just survival just rung throughout this book. How to survive,
Yeah.
just how to get to the next day, and then how to make sure that your children did too.
Hmm.
And that's been our story for generation upon generation upon generation. So
Hmm.
let's see. Oh, I got a happy birthday. Thank you. And Kenya, yes. Thank you. She enjoyed the interview. I have enjoyed doing this interview with you on this evening. And I am again appreciative to everyone who has tuned in for this hour while we talked about Yellow Wife. And everyone, please make sure that you are on the lookout for her other novels. And then, of course, I'm definitely going to be looking for Where the Bad Girls Go.
And
Yes.
if you haven't gotten your copy, go grab your copy right now. Yellow Wife is the fiction pick for January for Barnes and Noble. So you can go into any Barnes and Noble. They're actually buy one, get one 50% off only for the month of January. But
Oh,
also
awesome.
too, yeah, but also please support your local independent bookstores. Independent bookstores, they need us. So if you have one in your city, please go out and support your local bookstore as well. And
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah, thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you so much for
Thank
spending a
you.
portion of your birthday with me talking about my yellow wife, my story that came through me, but now it's everybody's story.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I hope that, you all walk away knowing that if Phoebe could do it, you could absolutely do it, because we
Mhm.
have so many more resources. The sky is not even the limit for us. So I charge you to go out and be your absolute best self and step on it, step on fear and just push yourself because this is the year that we are meant to shine. And so I ask you, I love you guys, and I push you all to shine brightly.
Thank you so, so very much. Everybody, again, just go out there. If you were on the live and you hadn't read the book yet, make sure that you do. She has this book, of course, on Audible as well as her others. So everyone support, support, support. And you all have a great night.
Yes, and happy birthday, Tam.
Thank you. Bye
Happy
everybody.
birthday to ya.
Ah,
Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Good night.